with Kyle Busch and now Kevin Harvick punching their tickets to Homestead in the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series playoffs with wins. Who will get the automatic third bid this week in Phoenix and join Busch, Harvick, and points leader Martin Truex Jr.? We'll wrap up Harvick's win last week in Texas. Take a look ahead at Phoenix and much more as Prime Sports NASCAR, brought to you by RaceReviewOnline.com on Prime Sports Network, starts now. All right, thanks for tuning into our NASCAR coverage here on the Prime Sports Radio Network for this Thursday, the 9th of November, 2017. So we have just a couple weeks to go, and then the season is over. I think we already have Kenny Bruce coming on next week. I think I'll be talking to him next Wednesday. And, of course, CJ and Eric will be back next week as well to preview the final race at Homestead. So we'll have a lot of coverage next week getting into the final race of the season, but we do have one more to go before Homestead, and so we'll talk as much as we can about that in the next 30 minutes to get you ready for the race. First, let's introduce co-host, RotoWire.com writer for NASCAR and F1, as well as a two-time Racing Writer of the Year award winner by the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, CJ Radoon. So, CJ, we had some interesting drama last week.
Yeah, definitely interesting. I mean, it was kind of an interesting outcome. I think everybody was expecting Kevin Harvick to kind of hold off on his win until this week when we visit Phoenix, but he got it one race earlier than everyone thought, and that probably should have been Truex's day, but as it turns out, Harvick was the one that was able to get the job done.
Also joining us is auto racing partner for Prime Sports Network, motorsports editor at RaceReviewOnline.com, Eric Smith. And so, Eric, we've got 3 in, 1 to go, and we have 5 drivers fighting for that spot. So, but you kind of think it's really down to 2 drivers fighting for points and 3 drivers fighting for a win.
Yeah, I really think right now Brad Keselowski and Denny Hamlin are definitely going to be the top 2 as far as trying to point their way in with the 19-point gap between those 2. I know Ryan Blaney's only 3 points back behind Hamlin, but I just think it's too much for him, Chase Elliott, and Jimmy Johnson to really overcome a points deficit of that magnitude. That they really have to win and get their way in. So really for them, stage points and anything like that is pretty much out the window. Those 3 really just need to focus on getting the victory lane on Sunday.
All right. So last week, I tell you what, I think that Texas is a track that is compared to a lot of these other tracks, CJ is probably been a pretty good track for the series. There's enough passing. There is also the ability to take 2 tires, which is always nice. That gives you different strategies coming in. We saw Martin Truex take advantage of that. So I think the Texas track is one of the small percentage of tracks that we've talked about over the last few years that has actually been pretty good for the series. And then we saw not necessarily that it was a lot of crazy stuff happening, and it was a great race from that respect, because really a lot of the interesting stuff happened mostly at the end, especially because of the timing, it being a race where you win and get in. But in general, there was a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I think a lot of that goes down to Texas and the desire just to continue to improve upon the show. So they've made some tweaks to the track that make it stand out a little bit differently than, say, Charlotte or Atlanta, the other 1.5-mile quad oval tracks. But it's definitely increased the racing. There's a lot of passing that we see. Like you said, you can leverage pit strategy, whether that be tires or fuel. I mean, last week we had 5 pretty consistent race leaders. There were more people that led laps, but pretty much 5 people up front throughout the day, which I think is arguably more than we've seen at some of these other tracks, especially back in Charlotte when Truex dominated and led almost the entire 600 miles. So I think that shows you that the track changes can bring a bit of parity to the series.
And so Harvick's win, Eric, what did you think about that? Because Harvick had been, he hadn't been. I mean, he gets off to a pretty decent start this year. It was okay, it was nothing great, but he gets off to a pretty decent start. He has a good run for probably a few months, but really, since maybe his runner-up at Pocono, the second Pocono race, he really hadn't been doing very much. He did have a few top fives so far in the playoffs, but didn't seem to contend a whole lot for wins. So maybe he's just maybe the win with Phoenix coming up this week is the perfect time for Kevin Harvick, because that's really all you got to do is find your groove within a few weeks of the new system, and it can get you a championship.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Harvick, he went through that kind of midsummer, just kind of lull. I mean, he wasn't terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but he also wasn't really contending for wins. From Dover in June to Bristol in August, he led 31 laps total, and 24
Wow.
of those were in his win at Sonoma, which was a road course. So that doesn't really translate well over to a playoff run. But in the playoffs, he's just kind of been solid and getting better by each week. And he said after the race on Sunday at Texas that he points to really Charlotte as the turning point. And that was the race where he finished third, but he led 149 laps and won both stages. And he said that was kind of the point that he knew that Ford really does have something. He thought maybe they're maybe at a disadvantage as compared to the Toyotas and Chevys for most of the year. They obviously started off strong and then kind of tapered off. And I know kind of the rumor around the garage with a lot of the crew chiefs are saying that maybe this Ford car is just not as aerodynamically stout as, say, as the new 2018 Toyota that was running this year.
Okay.
And then now Chevrolet had a new car coming out next year that they were kind of wondering, do they need a new car? Is this car not kind of up to par? And then all of a sudden, Charlotte came around, and he finished third, led 149 laps. As I said, he won both those stages, and he thought, whoa, wait a minute, maybe we do have something here. And then at Texas, I mean, yes, Trevor Bayne slowed up Truex there towards the end, but Harvick in a Ford passed Truex in a Toyota on his own merit there. I mean, would he have got him if Bayne wasn't in the way? That could be debatable, but he still would have finished second, and he was arguably one of the top 2 or 3 cars all day. He won the first stage. He finished second in the second stage, and he won. And now, as you said, we go to Phoenix. He's won 6 races there since 2012. And then at Homestead, I looked ahead at his stats. He's finished in the top 10 in every Homestead race but one. And his average finishing position there is 6.94.
Okay.
So you take what he did at Charlotte at 1.5 miles. You take what he just did last week at Texas at another 1.5 miles. You go to Phoenix, where he's always strong at. He's got a lot of momentum going into Homestead, a track that out of all the playoff drivers, I just went ahead and took all 8 that's left right now and looked at what they did. He's got the best finishing position out of all of them, and it's not even close. He's got 3 straight top 3 finishes there. So we almost need to start talking about, is he a favorite to win the championship now?
Yeah, and crazy, CJ, that even though he's got all these wins, these 9 wins at Phoenix, he hasn't led a lap in a few races there. That's a little bit surprising. So I'm not sure if that's something that he needs to worry too much about now that he's into Homestead. But still, a little bit surprising. What are you expecting this week from Harvick after a win?
Well, yeah, I would expect him to at least lead some laps. I think Eric's right. You got to start talking to him or talking about him as being a championship contender without question, not just by virtue of the fact that he won and is in, but by virtue of the fact that, like Eric said, he's fantastic at Homestead. He won a race now in the playoffs, so his momentum is building. It's not Phoenix where he won. It's at a track where he has never won before, and now he comes to what is arguably his best track, where he's won just an astonishing amount of races. He hasn't finished outside the top 10 more than once since like 2012, if I'm not mistaken. He's led triple digits in terms of laps for like 5 races in a row, and yeah, it's been the last 2 races where he hasn't led any laps, but he still finished 4th and 6th in that time. So I think his momentum is building right at the right time. We've seen Ford getting better over the past couple of weeks. I think those 2 factors combined really give Martin Truex and Kyle Busch something to worry about as we go into this weekend next.
What about Denny Hamlin, Eric? Because Denny, who was my pick to win the championship before the playoffs started, and I really liked the way that he had been racing heading into the playoffs, and he's kind of kept that run going. And we know what happened a couple weeks ago. So far, it hasn't affected him. He still has a couple more weeks possibly to see if it does, but But he might be the, outside of course the obvious, the Kyle Bushes or the Martin Truex Juniors. He might be the most consistent driver really over the past few months.
I agree. I was looking at his stats too, and if you go back to the Coca-Cola 600 back on Memorial Day weekend, out of all those races we've had since then, he's only finished outside the top 6 times. So you pretty much roll him off the truck and he's going to be a top 7 contender. He finished 3rd at Texas. I thought that was a strong statement because we talked last week and I was kind of a little worried about him at Texas because after he swept there in both races there in 2010, he hasn't had a top 5 there since. He unloads the truck off the truck at Texas, and he was 2nd in the first 2 practice sessions, and then he was quickest in final practice. He qualified 2nd, and he finishes 3rd. So that tells me he's got a lot of speed in that car. He's got 5 straight top 7 finishes, and really that to me alone should make him a championship 4 contender. But I question a couple of moves that he made here in the playoffs, or the race right before the playoff in Southern 500, where they had an encumbered finish. Well, if you win a race in the Cup Series this year, they give you 5 playoff points. If it gets taken away, so does the playoff points. So he lost 5 points right there. And then we discussed this after Martinsville. I was warning the fallback of when he wrecked Chase and he was 2nd at that time and he ends up finishing 7th. Those are 5 valuable points that he lost there. Mm-hmm. Well, 5 plus 5 is 10. Well, he's 19 points out right now. You take 10 points off that, he's only 9. Well, that's a totally different race for him this weekend where he can point his way to Homestead pretty easily because I think he's going to have a better shot at winning Phoenix this weekend than Brad Keselowski would. And now all of a sudden you're talking about a guy going to Homestead, another Toyota with quite possibly could be 6 straight top 7 finishes. He too is pretty good at Homestead. He's got 9 top 10 finishes there over the last 11 starts. He could win the championship, but did those 2 mistakes cost him a shot at a championship that were self-inflicted?
What about Ryan Blaney, CJ? Because remember when he first broke in with Elliott last year, we were talking about that. Okay, you got one guy who's gets the luxury of taking over for Jeff Gordon, and you have another guy with the team and then taking over for Jeff Gordon, and then you have Ryan Blaney kind of all by himself. And that wouldn't necessarily mean that Elliott's a better driver. Just he's got a better team behind him, and he's probably going to be a little bit more successful earlier in his career. But here we are a couple years in, and Blaney's actually right now ahead of Chase Elliott in their first run in a playoff situation. And Blaney's, he's got a legitimate shot here if he doesn't win to get into to get into Homestead.
Yeah, he has done everything right, and it's beyond impressive what he's been able to achieve. I mean, think about it. This is a one-car team, and yeah, they have the alliance with Penske, and he's ultimately moving to Penske next year. And man, am I excited for that, because if he's been able to do that with Wood Brothers, wait till he gets in, with the real organization. So, the sky's the limit for him. He's just had a fantastic season. He got the win that he absolutely deserved. I think we could see it when he first started making those one-off starts in the series, that he was the real deal and he was going to get the job done. I just didn't think that his natural talent was going to overcome, the entire organization of Hendrick Motorsports, which it has. But I think combined with that, you got to look at where the Chevrolets are right now. Look at both Elliott as well as Johnson, and even Kyle Larson. Chevrolet's just not got it compared to Toyota. Ford has found a little bit more recently, and obviously Blaney driving a Ford gets the benefit of that. But without a doubt, he is punching above his weight being with a one-car team. Cannot wait to see him with Penske.
And then speaking of Elliott, Eric, this has been a problem all year. It's been the qualifying situation. So we kind of knew that this might happen, where it would really come into play the closer we get to Homestead. And it did for Elliott. He didn't even qualify, and he starts way back. He ends respectable, but what could have happened if he would have been able to qualify?
Yeah, that could have changed everything drastically because, starting 34th, you're pretty well, and I wrote about that last weekend, that you're behind the 8 ball automatically. You need to get in the top 10, but you don't have many laps to do so. for that first stage, and he nearly did. He finished 11th in that first stage, but he didn't get any stage points. So how much did that qualifying position hurt him? To me, I think that hurt him really. That set the tone for his weekend, because now you're playing pretty much with one arm behind your back. You have to come through the field, and then, of course, everybody's going to pit again, and you really don't have the luxury of just taking 2 tires like some of those guys did, because you wore them out trying to come through the field.
Yep.
Well, now you're going to try to come through from between 11th and 15th and gain up, which he did. He got 6 stage points in the second stage, but it's just a lot to ask for with a car like Chevrolet that they've struggled on mile-and-a-half tracks this year and having power, that you're going to have to come from 34th to get all the way up there, use a lot of your car, and then now have to contend with the Truexes, and obviously Keselowski made a rebound, and Harvick, and Kyle Busch fell back, but he moved up and then fell back again. You got to deal with those guys. That's hard to do. That's a hard task to ask for when you haven't started up front and have good track position all day. So to me, I think that really ruined the rest of his weekend and really his playoff chances. Now he's got to win, which, not saying he can't win at Phoenix. I think he's going to be a contender at 3 starts. He's got a 9.67 average finish. He led 106 laps there back in March. So, and he actually won the second stage in March.
Yeah.
So he can win, but he's never won a race before. So he really put a lot of faith in a guy that's never won a race and 75 career starts to win his first race in a winner-go-home situation.
Yeah,
and that's a lot of pressure.
And there's no way that Elliott and Jimmy Johnson, I mean, you tell me, but they can't get into Homestead without winning, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Elliott's 49 points out. Johnson's 52 points out. I don't see one of the two making up enough points to points their way in, and with only one spot left in the playoffs or the Final Four, they both can't make it. So one of them's got to make it, and as far back as they are points-wise, they're going to have to win. And it's not out of the realm of imagination that neither of them could win, but if I had to choose one of them, it's Elliott, because Johnson is he just doesn't have it this year. And I would definitely think Elliott is the guy that he could have it. And as CJ said about Blaney, I think he's the guy that could have it. Blaney, he's finished in the top 8 4 of his last 5 races. He scored stage points in all 4 of in every stage, actually the last 4 races. He's got 2 top 10s of his last 3 starts at Phoenix. So I look at Blaney and Elliott with a realistic shot. Johnson, I look at basically he needs a miracle in order to make it to Homestead.
As a matter of fact, Penske drivers all looked good at Phoenix earlier this year. They were all strong, Keselowski, Logano, and then, of course, future Penske Blaney. And matter of fact, Blaney, who had a he actually would have been, we would think he would have had a better shot, but he had a broken adjuster for his track bar, and that really hurt any chances to move forward with his car, which was fast. So he had a fast car. Matter of fact, he even sped on lap, I think right around lap 258 when he was in 10th place. So, if you throw out those issues with a fast car, then Ryan Blaney definitely has a chance to advance, even if he doesn't win. But again, this is one of those situations that you don't want to you don't want to wait until the last possible second to get a win, CJ. Even though when we take a look at what's happened at this track lately, we have seen a lot of late cautions. And Phoenix has made it pretty interesting. It's been maybe this is a well-timed situation to have Phoenix before Homestead, based on how many overtime races we've had recently.
Yeah, for whatever reason, Phoenix has really become one of the kings of having these late race cautions. And what I love so much about it is the unique layout of the track. So you can do things with strategy. You can go for 2 tires. I mean, that's how Ryan Newman ended up winning this year. Earlier this year was deciding not to pit and stay out on old tires, and he was able to hold them off long enough to be able to get the job done. It produces these types of races, opens the door to a lot of strategy, and it's exactly the type of excitement builder that you're going to want to get when you're trying to decide the spot going into the playoffs. I still think that Kevin Harvick's got an edge. I think the Ford's up there, and one thing, as you were saying before, with the Penske guys looking strong at Phoenix, it's going to be interesting to see how they perform this week, because last year or earlier this year it was before Joey Logano got that encumbered win, and I think that was where we really saw Ford go into the slums, for lack of a better word, through the summer, and then just recently they started to find something and bring it back together. So it'll be interesting to see how the Penske guys perform this weekend.
Yeah, and that really puts, you would think, Brett Keselowski in a good situation because he had a strong car earlier this year. They seem to be dialed in, their team, with this specific racetrack. We mentioned how he gets off to a bad start last week, and yet it doesn't completely ruin his day, as he was able to battle back and finish fifth. So, but you don't want to have that happen again, especially this week with all that additional pressure on you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he's in an interesting position in himself, because talked to him and Logano and the Penske guys that Brad's calling this weekend's race a must-win, which is kind of odd that you're 19 points to the good. You might want to maintain that.
Sure.
You think that if you can finish really good in the first couple of stages, then you set yourself up to really get a top 10, top 15, and you're moving on. But he's so fearful of that Denny Hamlin or Ryan Blaney or either the Hendrick drivers, Johnson or Elliott, win, because he basically is going the mindset that I could finish the top 5, or I could even win both stages and finish second in the race.
Yep.
But if one of those guys
steals a win,
tires in the end,
and like Ryan Newman did last year, earlier this year,
in March, he said I could be out of the playoffs and have 3 top 5 finishes in this round and not even advance. So he's treating it as a must-win. And Joey Logano, interesting enough, said that while he won this race last year, he started on the pole at Phoenix in March. Phoenix is one of his better tracks. He basically has told Brad and even Ryan Blaney that for practice and even qualifying, he's all in to help those two. He said he'll help wherever they need it. If they need a setup question, if they want him to test setup on his number 22 Ford and any of the practice sessions, he's willing to test anything they like. He's willing to throw his car away, basically, and say, if there's something you want to try, use my car. You can test the setup on yours and test the setup on mine, and we'll compare notes. So basically, you think of Brad and Ryan Blaney as having an extra car at their disposal to test setups. Plus, Logano's been good there. He's going to likely be running up front. So you've got another buffer that can kind of maybe make Denny Hamlin's day a little more miserable on trying to pass. I wouldn't be shocked if you see all 3 of those guys running in the top 5, and Logano being the third of the 3, kind of basically blocking for him, and maybe best man have at it at the front towards the end of the race. Obviously, if cautions can dictate some of that, but Brad's going into this, it's a must-win. He's not trying to maintain. He's just so fearful of what happened to Kyle Larson in Kansas, to where he blew his engine in the first stage and got no stage points, and his 29-point advantage was gone. He doesn't want that to happen, but he also doesn't want somebody else to win. So he's treating this as a must-win situation.
Speaking of must-win situations, CJ, Jimmy Johnson, any chance that we see another miracle win by Jimmy Johnson to get in? Because really, if you take a look at his racing the last couple of years, we've talked a lot about the fact that he gets off to these decent starts. Everybody starts going, oh, there's Jimmy Johnson again. And then he completely disappears for the rest of the season. He had a miraculous win last year. I mean, we all know what happened at Homestead. For him to be able to basically just get the keys to the championship in those last few laps was just unreal. He can't expect that to happen again, but you never know. So what do you think about Jimmy Johnson's chances? And do you think that retirement might be coming a little bit sooner than anybody knows?
Wow, interesting question. Yeah, I'll obviously take the first one. The fact that he's still alive in the championship, there's a chance. I mean, he's the only guy I know that is in this series that can crash, spin 6 times, and then still come back and finish in the top 5 or top 10 for whatever reason. Like, this guy's luck is unbelievable, and we've seen it throughout every stage of the playoffs so far, because he has not come on so far in 2017. and he has been absent, but yet here he is, in the last race before we get to Homestead. So just by virtue of the fact that he's alive, we're coming to Phoenix, the place where he's won 4 times. He's definitely got a chance. It would take the sun and the moon and all the stars to align to get that to happen again, almost like it did at Homestead last year. But if he's there, he's got a chance. And I don't think retirement's in his vocabulary at this point. I think he is really anxious to add that extra championship on, become the sole leader. I think he's got a number of good years left in him. We are definitely seeing a new generation with all the young drivers coming in, without question. But I don't think that he's in the same spot as Dale Earnhardt. Earnhardt was hurt. He's got, other priorities outside, and Johnson's got his family, but he's not hurt. He loves racing. He's still young enough and fit enough to be able to, have that desire to keep on going. Plus, he's with one of the best organizations that he continues to be successful at. I think once we see a couple of years of frustration for him, and maybe this is just the first of those that we're starting to see now, that might change a little bit, but I don't think we're at that point yet.
All right, Eric. I mean, any chance that if Jimmy even slides further next year, let's say maybe he barely makes the playoffs and then he's out in first round, or let's say he doesn't even make the playoffs for whatever reason. Do you think that could change his mind about, well, you know what, if I'm going to race like this and things aren't going to get much better, then maybe it's time.
I don't know if I think. Yeah, he'll definitely obviously run next year in 2019. I know his contract, he just signed one this past year, and it ends after the 2020 season. I think that's definitely it. I don't think he drives past 2020, but I do know he wants to remain relevant. And just looking at his stats, this year alone, he's only got 4 top 5 finishes. He hasn't had anything less than 10 since his rookie year in 2002, and he had 6. So he's dropping off there. The numbers that he hasn't had since he first came into the series. Top 10 finishes, he's only got 11 this year. He only had 16 last year, and those are the 2 lowest amounts he's had over his entire career. He's never had anything less than 20, so top 10s are now going back down. His laps led, he's led 217 laps for the year. And from 2007 to 2014, he's led at least 1,000 laps every year.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got his laps led, and his second lowest amount of laps led was 2005 at 547. So that number went in half. And he's had 1 top 5 over the last 21 races. He's led 90 laps over the last 26 races.
Mm-hmm.
So he's fading.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's fair to expect those numbers to really raise any next year. And my biggest reason for that is look who his teammates are going to be. He's going to have Alex Bowman, who's had really 1 full year under his belt in Cup and with BK Racing. So it's not like you can bounce setups off him. You've got William Byron, who's going to be a rookie, and you've got Chase Elliott, who's never won a race. So Johnson is now going to have to take on the senior role like he kind of had this year. Yeah. So not only does he have to mentor these guys and kind of bring them up to speed, he's got to fix his own program.
Sure.
And with his numbers slipping now, I almost think it's not fair to ask him to improve them next year when everything's going to come through him. How can Jimmy Johnson fix a problem this year when he's got all these young guys coming next year? All the setups are going to be coming from Johnson. So it's not like he can go to William Byron and say, hey, I'm struggling in turn 4 at Atlanta. What can you help me with?
Yeah.
He's not going to know.
Sure.
So I really think we're seeing the end of his career. Can he win another championship? Absolutely. I would never bet against the guy. But I do think we're seeing the end of his career. I don't think his numbers are ever going to be what they were in his peak when he won all those championships in a row. And every year, if you look at it, they're just dipping more and more and more.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to ask the guy for him to raise back up again. I think what he's doing this year, he knows that they're at a deficit. Jimmy Johnson's been a guy that he loves loose race cars. That's what he likes to drive. Nope. Not many other drivers in the series can drive a race car like Jimmy Johnson sets up. That's why he's always been so fast. Well, NASCAR adopted this low downforce package, and they keep wanting to take more and more downforce off. And him and Chad Knaus cannot figure it out to find a race car. I mean, after 34 races, if they can't figure it out yet, they're not going to figure it out in 2 more races. So are they really going to figure it out next year with 3 drivers, 3 basically rookie drivers per se coming in? I just throw Chase Elliott in that because he's only 21 years old. So I don't really have a lot of faith that he's going to even turn it around next year. I think maybe 2019, but maybe he wins in 2019 and steps away and doesn't even come back in 2020. But I think Hendrick's going to have a plan to look at somebody pretty soon to replace him. And the other interesting wrench in this whole thing, too, is Lowe's. They only signed through next year. They didn't sign for 2019 or 2020, which I thought was interesting because Hendrick likes to keep his deals with the driver and the sponsor kind of tied together. He signed Johnson through 2020, but they never said anything about a sponsor for 2019 and 2020.
Okay.
Say Johnson has another year like this next year, and he doesn't have a sponsor for 2019.
Sure.
Does he get pushed out?
Interesting.
Is he that? So it's going to be very interesting to watch how this kind of unfolds.
Well, first of all, so before the program changes, the cars were looser.
Yes, he loved to drive a very loose race car, and of course, loose is fast. The looser you are, the faster you are, but it's all about car control and feel.
Sure.
So they used to take a lot of downforce off their car already. Well, NASCAR made this rule where obviously the spoiler height, if you remember the last few years, they have been kind of experimenting with, I remember at Indy a few years ago, that thing looked like you couldn't even see out the back windshield. The spoiler was so tall.
Yeah.
Well, Johnson, they took downforce off elsewhere, and that's why he was so good because they found other areas to be fast. Well, now you have that spoiler is basically non-existent. It's about as small as you can see, and he's not translating well over it because now he's got to add downforce other places, but he's not good at adding downforce. They're used to taking it off, and now that car is just basically, and you've heard him on the radio on his radio at Texas saying he cannot drive that race car. He's holding on. He's struggling with it not spinning out.
Yeah.
In Kansas, he spun in 2 times in a span of 5 laps. He just can't hang on. So their best option is these, like a Phoenix, a track where it's not really a downforce track. You're not really looking at speed. But say he wins and he goes to Homestead, he's going to have to hope that the stars align again because he's not going to win that race on speed alone. And that's a real problem for them to have. And that's why I think you're seeing these guys, the 48 team, they know they're not going to qualify real well. They're going for stage points. Round 2, the only reason he's even here right now is he had 20 stage points in the round of 12. Kyle Larson had 11. Johnson beat him by 9 points, which 20 minus 11 is 9.
Okay.
That's the only reason he's alive right now.
Yeah.
In the round of 8. So, and you look at the stage points here this round. Martinsville, he stayed out. He spun and he started in the back, and he didn't pit, and he got 7 stage points in the first stage. He only got 1 in the second stage and finished 12th. Last week, he scored 0 stage points. So that's why he's in the predicament that he's in.
Okay.
And they just can't figure out the race car.
Yeah, it just seems to me, CJ, that because the racing really hasn't seemed like it's improved much. I don't know. It seems like we talked about this with the tires. It seems like NASCAR is just trying to find more and more ways to make the cars, I don't know, to make them to the point where they are easier to drive and that the drivers won't have any issues with them, which is counterproductive to what the fans want to see.
Yeah, I think we saw a backlash when they moved to the car of tomorrow, however many years ago it was, because those cars back then were so aerodynamically dependent that they wanted to put more of it back into the driver's hand. And then they made those changes, and lo and behold, you got Jimmy Johnson. Like everything that Eric said is absolutely true. He loves to drive a loose race car, and he's been able to take that downforce off and be able to be faster than everybody in certain parts of the track. And then, like every other series, when you get somebody that's really dominant, you start making the rule tweaks to start bringing more competitiveness back into it. And
sure.
Don't be fooled. Every single one of these changes that we've had over the past couple of years are designed to hinder Jimmy Johnson and Chad Knaus. There's no argument about that.
But it's not making the racing better.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think like we talk about all the time, you need the tracks that produce the good racing. You've got to be able to have grip throughout, and you got to give guys the mechanical grip and good machinery to be able to, or I guess relatively equal machinery to be able to see who truly is the best driver versus whether, you've got a superior engine or you've got a superior aerodynamic body. And I think that's where they're trying to find the balance, and they just haven't found it yet. I think this year's been better than the past couple of years, but we're still not there yet. I still think we need better tracks, though, to be honest with you. I think that's the answer for me.
All right. What do you think then, CJ? Who do you like this week? Who's getting in? Who's joining the three?
Interesting question. So you gotta look at Keselowski and Hamlin. Honestly, Hamlin, you're right. He's absolutely the more consistent of the bunch right now. But for whatever reason, I think that Keselowski, with his focus on the stage points, the real change in strategy that he has to approaching races since we've gotten a little bit further into the playoffs, I think is starting to pay off for him. So I think it's going to be a close battle between those two, and I think Keselowski probably has the edge.
All right, and what about you, Eric? Who do you think's going in?
I agree with CJ. I think you're going to see Hamlin and Keselowski start up front, run up front. I don't think Hamlin can win. I mean, he'll be a top 5, I think. I just don't see him winning the actual race, and that's if Keselowski's up there. The only way Hamlin at that point will make it is he's going to have to win, because I just think Keselowski is going to get stage points in the first and second stages. And even if Hamlin's ahead of him, I don't think it's going to be by a whole lot to where that 19-point advantage, I don't think it's going to be less than 10 going into that final stage.
We might have to wreck him.
Yeah. So that may be your only option. But here's the thing. Does Chase Elliott and Jimmy Johnson also have to win? And I think Chase Elliott was going to be up front on Sunday. Is this his opportunity to spin him, to make his life miserable? Is this the time when Hamlin gets his payback? And that's why I just don't trust it. He can win, but I don't think he will win. And I worry about someone else ruin his day. And you also remember Hamlin's had run-ins with Joey Logano in the past. And Logano said he's going to help Brad and Blaney. Does all these factors go against Hamlin? He struggles with pit road speeding penalties. Does he get an untimely pit road speeding penalty?
Yeah.
I would like to say Hamlin, but my head's telling me Keselowski's just that 19-point advantage. I just think he maintains it well enough to move along.
All right. Well, look, we know if Elliott wants revenge, he's going to have to get it this week, because you can't get revenge at Homestead. I mean, that would be going a little bit too far with the 4 guys trying to win a championship. So I think if you want to get it this week. I can understand if he's not close to him this week, but he's close to him at Homestead, maybe. But if he's close to him this week and he doesn't wreck him, then you can't do it at Homestead. That's just me. So
no, NASCAR will come down. They're pretty stern in the drivers' meeting, telling these drivers, if you're not part of the playoffs, basically stay out of the playoff drivers' way. Don't alter, because there's a lot of money on the line for sponsors, and you don't want to see that. You don't want to. That would almost be like a playoff team in the NFL hiring the Jacksonville Jaguars. Always been terrible. So say the Pittsburgh Steelers sign a guy from Jacksonville to come onto their team and play the New England Patriots in the playoffs, and that guy's only job is to hurt Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Is that really fair?
Yeah, sure.
So they basically tell these guys, just stay out of it, and that's why you see so many playoff guys finishing really in the top. If there's 8 playoff drivers, that's why you usually see 5 of them in the top 5. It's because the other guys they almost tiptoe around them. You don't want to make a mistake and ruin somebody's, not just their day, but their championship. So I don't see Elliott. This is his only time where he could make that payback, and I don't think people would bat an eye about it. I think NASCAR would probably love to promote it, to be honest with you. I think that would be a big story going into Homestead if you got some more drama.
Yeah.
Does Hamlin pay him back at Homestead?
Yeah.
So other than that, I don't think you'll see anything else.
All right. Excellent, Eric. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thank you, CJ. Looking forward to previewing Homestead next week with you.
Thanks. Have a good one.
All right. That's CJ Radoon. That's Eric Smith. And that's it for our show today. So don't forget, next week we've got 3 analysts, 2 shows, including another visit from NASCAR.com editor Kenny Bruce. Also, check out all our on-demand shows following every live broadcast on our YouTube or iTunes pages under Prime Sports Network. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. Thanks for tuning into this PSN production. I'm your host, Greg DePalma. We'll see you next week for more Prime Sports NASCAR, brought to you by RaceReviewOnline.com. And enjoy the race.